Hey everybody, welcome to Crazy Tech Lab, and we have a very interesting addition to the lab today. It is an AMD Radeon RX 7900 GRE. So this card has only been available as part of system builds for quite a while. There are a few reviews out there, but it's tricky doing a review of something when you don't really have a price. But we do have a price for this card today. It is coming to retailer shelves, and it is coming at a very attractive price of $549, which puts it pretty much squarely against the 4070 from NVIDIA. That card is available for around $520 at the low end, and anywhere upwards of $550, $560, $570 for like a premium model or something like that. So this card aiming to both compete with that card in the 4070 Super, but also plugging the gap between the 7800 XT and the 7900 XT, which is fairly significant on occasion. So AMD relying on previous generations of graphics cards to do that. So essentially what we've got here is a cut down 7900 XT. It's got 16 gigabytes of memory, so does the 7800 XT, to be fair. So what we want here is A, to plug that gap, and B, for it to outperform the 4070, which costs about the same or a little bit less. So as long as this card is doing that, AMD is on to a winner. So I'd like to thank AMD and Sapphire for sending over this card today, and all that's left to do is for me to ask you to subscribe to my channel. It means a lot to have your support, and if you like and comment down below as well, just helps punch me through the algorithm and gets me noticed, and I can carry on doing videos like this. And also, if you found today's video informative, you can even buy me a coffee using the link down below, or just hit the thanks button in the bit down below as well. So what we're going to be doing now is running through some benchmarks at a whole range of resolutions: 1080p, 1440p and 4K, because I don't usually test cards above this at 1080p because I just don't feel you're best served by spending £500–600 or more on a graphics card if you're going to be gaming at 1080p. I think the kind of people that do that are just such a small part of my audience. It's just not really worth doing. So if you're going to be gaming at 1080p, I'd recommend probably dropping down to a 7800 XT at most. This card is aimed at 1440p gaming, and as we'll see later, it's a pretty good 4K gaming card as well. So that's it from this part of the video. Let's crack on with the bench. My test system includes an Intel Core i9 at 12900K, which is running at stock speed but is water cooled to allow it to boost to its maximum frequencies. We've also got 32 gigabytes of Kingston DDR5 6000 memory, and that is all plugged into an Asus Maximus Z790 Hero motherboard. All the latest drivers and updates are used in my testing to ensure comparable results. So what we need to work out from the graphs is whether or not the 7900 GRE is outpacing equivalent NVIDIA cards, and the key NVIDIA card it needs to outpace is the RTX 4070, which has received a small price cut since the introduction of the 4070 Super and is now readily available for between $530 and $550. The GRE, of course, coming in at $550 launch price. So as long as the AMD card betters the 4070 in most of the graphs, it's on to a winner. And obviously, if it's outperforming the 4070 Super, then it's doing really, really well, because that card is currently retailing for around $600. Starting off with Watch Dogs Legion then, and this is a game that generally prefers NVIDIA cards overall, but here the RX 7900 GRE is off to a great start because it is faster than the RTX 4070 at both 1080p and 1440p, and it's hot on the heels of the RTX 4070 Super as well, especially at 1440p. Stepping up to 4K now then, and on the right we have DLSS enabled for those of you that are perhaps considering NVIDIA cards. This is just the benefit that you get from enabling DLSS in this game. Without DLSS though, it's a clear win for the RX 7900 GRE, which massively outperforms the RTX 4070, and again just a couple of frames away from matching the RTX 4070 Super. Again though, DLSS does give NVIDIA a significant advantage in this game if you want to enable it. Our next game is Halo Infinite, and in campaign mode, and I'm also loving the TV series of Halo, onto the second season now of that series, so let me know what you think of that in the comments. I think it's pretty good so far. Here though, AMD not doing quite as well. This game does generally prefer NVIDIA cards, and here the RX 7900 GRE not quite able to match the RTX 4070, and not really offering that much extra performance over the RX 7800 XT either. Stepping up to higher resolutions, and at 1440p we have the card closely matching the RTX 4070, so doing a fair bit better here than it was earlier, and it's kind of sandwiched in between the RX 7800 XT and the 7900 XT, so it's kind of a good midway point between those cards. At 4K it finally outstrips the RTX 4070, so it's clear that the extra memory that this card has does start to pay dividends the further up the resolution range you go, and again sitting somewhat between the RX 7900 XT and the 7800 XT, but it's closer to the latter, the 7900 XT still offering quite a bit extra performance. Our next game is Forza Horizon 5, and at 1080p with ray tracing enabled, the RX 7900 GRE outperforms pretty much everything else in the graph. The only one that gets close to it on the average frame rate is the RTX 4070 Ti Super, and the RX 7800 XT sitting a fair way behind in this particular benchmark, so it's a good result for AMD there. We don't have any faster cards in the graphs because I just don't think that anything that's costing well over $500, or well, essentially well over $600 if you're going to get something that's faster than the 7900 GRE, is worth testing at 1080p, because I wouldn't really recommend getting that card for this low resolution. Moving on to 1440p though, and again we have the 7900 GRE performing really well in this game. Forza Horizon 5 does generally perform AMD, does generally prefer AMD cards, which is why we can see it outperforming the RTX 4080 Super here, at least on the minimum 99th percentile, if not the average frame rate. So obviously miles faster than the RTX 4070 Super and 4070. Stepping up to 4K, and again we have some DLSS and FSR this time, action enabled on the right hand graph. We'll talk about 4K straight up first of all, and on the left hand graph we've got the GRE again outperforming the RTX 4070 Super and the RTX 4070 Ti. Here though, the RTX 4070 Ti Super, which is of course much more expensive, did manage to outperform it slightly, but overall it's a win here for AMD. It's got a cheaper card and it offers more performance than the RTX 4070 Ti and the 4070 Super. On the right hand side though, we have a pretty interesting graph, because Forza Horizon 5 is one of the few games out there which supports FSR and DLSS. So the Nvidia cards here all have DLSS enabled, and the AMD cards, just to remind you, I've put FSR in brackets because that's what's enabled for the AMD cards in this game. So the GRE outperforming the RTX 4070 with DLSS enabled, and also coming pretty close to bettering the RTX 4070 Super overall as well. That card had a slightly higher minimum 99th percentile, but the AMD card had a better average frame rate. So overall, I would say that it's a win for Nvidia there, although it doesn't really seem to gain that much extra performance by enabling FSR. Moving on to Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition now then, and at 1080p, I've excluded all the cards that were more expensive than the RTX 4070 Ti Super, because I just wouldn't recommend buying a 4080 or a 4090 to game at 1080p. With that out of the way, the RX 7900 GRE does sit at the top of the graph, but only thanks to its high minimum 99th percentile. The average frame rate was actually slower than the RTX 4070 and everything that was more expensive than that. So overall, it is still just about a win for AMD though, because obviously we've got the RTX 4070 sitting at a similar price tag, and overall the RX 7900 GRE was faster. Moving on to 1440p now then, and the 7900 GRE starts to stretch its legs and pretty much matches the average frame rate of the RTX 4070, but offers a much higher minimum 99th percentile. The RTX 4070 Super, meanwhile, was pretty much the same on the minimum 99th percentile, but did offer a much higher average frame rate. Stepping up to 4K, which is a pretty tall order in this game, is very demanding still, and the RX 7900 GRE outperforming the RTX 4070 on the minimum 99th percentile, but not the average frame rate where the Nvidia card was slightly faster, but this game does generally prefer AMD cards. The RX 7900 XT obviously not really offering that much more performance. To get a lot more performance, you need to step up to the RTX 4070 Super, which offered a much higher average frame rate. Now, if you're interested in the impact of DLSS, then you can see that in the graph on the right. Unfortunately, again, this game doesn't have FSR support, so handing NVIDIA a sizable advantage in Metro Exodus, where even the RTX 4060 Ti, the 8GB version, was faster than the 7900 GRE. Moving on to Microsoft Flight Simulator now, which is a personal favourite of mine, and this game is pretty picky when it comes to hardware. There are lots of ways to bottleneck it, and there aren't too many ways of boosting frame rates other than just getting a more powerful graphics card and using frame generation as well. Frame generation is a really, really great way of boosting frame rates in this game. So here we've got the 7900 GRE sitting at the top of the graph, actually a higher average frame rate than the NVIDIA cards that we've included at 1080p, so that's probably worth remembering. Stepping up to 1440p and things look a little bit different, but it still has a higher average frame rate than the likes of the RTX 4070, 4070 Super and 4070 Ti. And in the 1440p graph though, a lot of those cards have either the same or higher minimum 99th percentile, so it's kind of a toss-up between those two. Stepping up to 4K, and we start to have more of a GPU bottleneck in Microsoft Flight Simulator, which puts more of an emphasis on graphics performance, which is why we see much more of a spread at 4K compared to the previous graph. So RX 7900 GRE sitting at a minimum 99th percentile of 40, which is the same as the 4070 Super, but it does outperform the 4070 Super by a few frames on the average frame rate. So overall, that's a win for AMD at this resolution. And stepping up to enabling FSR, and that's FSR2 I should add, and DLSS. And here is where NVIDIA starts to see a bit more benefit, because we've enabled frame generation here as well. And even the RTX 4070 with DLSS 3.0 enabled is significantly faster than the RX 7900 GRE, and the game does look pretty awesome as well. Our final game test is Rainbow Six Extraction, and at 1080p we've got a great result for the 7900 GRE. We've got a higher average frame rate than the 4070 Ti Super, much faster obviously than the 4070 Super as well, so it's pretty much a win here for the cheaper 7900 GRE. Stepping up to 1440p, we've got the 7900 GRE actually outperforming the 4070 Ti, so obviously a lot faster than the 4070 Super as well, so 1440p, it's another win for AMD. Stepping up to 4K then, and still some very, very smooth frame rates from most cards on test. The 7900 GRE outperforming the 4070 Super, so it's essentially a win for AMD at this resolution in this game as well, and coming pretty close to matching the 4070 Ti as well. Now, obviously, this is yet another game that has DLSS support, so I have to talk about the figures there just in case you're interested in using that. The 7900 GRE essentially getting outperformed by the 4060 Ti 8GB. So just worth bearing in mind that if you are willing to use DLSS or you play a lot of Rainbow Six, might be worth going for the for a cheaper NVIDIA option. Our final graph is power consumption, and we've got a system power draw of 418 watts for the 7900 GRE, and that's just 3 watts more than the 7800 XT. So it probably explains why the 7900 GRE was not that much faster than the 7800 XT in some of the tests, and was perhaps a lot further away from the RX 7900 XT. So compared to the NVIDIA equivalents, we've got the RTX 4070 drawing quite a bit less power at 322 watts, and the RTX 4070 Super, which is more expensive and faster in a few tests, at 392 watts. So NVIDIA does enjoy a slight advantage when it comes to power efficiency, not least of all because the RTX 4070 Ti and Ti Super are only around 30 or 40 watts more. So what do we make of the AMD Radeon RX 7900 GRE then? Well, this card I think does exactly what it set out to do, which is to plug the gap between the 7800 XT and the 7900 XT, usually leaning more towards the former rather than the latter, but often it does kind of sit neatly between the two cards, which is kind of what we want to see. Now, in terms of the really important issue here of matching or bettering the 4070, it does that pretty well. We usually see it outperforming that card, sometimes significantly so, which is exactly what we wanted to see. So AMD generally offering much better value here, especially because the 4070 Super and the 4070 Ti were usually easy targets for this card as well. Now, Nvidia does more often than not have a bit of an advantage with the 4070 Ti and 4070 Ti Super, but you'd expect that because they're much more expensive cards. Even the 4070 Super is a more expensive card on average than this one is meant to retail at the moment. So in terms of value, I think this card offers great value, especially if you're gaming at 1440p. It even stretches its legs at 4K, and that's where you see it start to edge out a lead over the likes of the 4070 and 4070 Super. Those cards limited to 12 gigabytes of RAM, of course, this card gaining 16. So from that point of view, I think AMD has done pretty well here. Obviously, Nvidia still has an advantage with DLSS, and when it comes to using frame generation, Flight Simulator, for example, we saw a big advantage to Nvidia there. But in standard rasterization, AMD is still king with the 7900 GRE, especially if you're a 1440p or a 4K gamer. So again, I'd like to thank AMD and Sapphire for sending over the Sapphire Pulse 7900 GRE today. Don't forget to like and comment on this video as well. And if you found it informative, why not thank me using the button down below, or even buy me a coffee, which you can do in the link below as well. So thanks for your attention today, and I'll be back very, very soon with more reviews. So stay tuned to Crazy Tech Lab. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll be back very, very soon.